Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the people that are present here in person. The weather is quite gloomy, but thank you for being here. For everyone joining virtually, thank you as well for taking the time. Just by way of brief reintroduction on our panel, for the benefit of everyone that's logged on virtually. We have in the room with me, Mr. Michael Lee, Mr. Ho Yi, and joining us virtually from New York, Mr. Jose Sanchez, and in Switzerland, Ms. Chloé Terrapon. So thank you, everyone. And without further delay, I'll get straight into it. The reason why you're all here to ask some questions to the panelists. So let's kickstart this conversation with difficult conversations surrounding career progression. And career progression can include a lot of things, sometimes performance reviews, internal promotions, even lateral moves. Michael, maybe I can put two questions to you. First, how does a junior lawyer initiate these conversations? And second, can they come off as being too entitled in doing so early on in their careers?
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. I wish I had eyes in the back of my head, and then I would be able to see the other people who are joining in remotely. But anyway, I've got you in front of me, which is fine. I think those are two interesting questions, and I speak from my time as a partner in a law firm before I said I'd become an arbitrator, joined a set of barristers' chambers. And I would say the first step is you have appraisals, which I'm sure everybody has when they're associates in large international firms. And that is the time when, of course, you should be able to raise any issues that you have, salary, position, whether you're getting sufficient work, and so on. But there are times when you can't wait, you don't want to wait, and shouldn't have to wait for an informal appraisal. And then I think it's quite open to the associate to tap the partner that they work for, or the senior associate that they work for, and say, look, I do want to raise some issues with you. Can we have a meeting? Can we have a coffee? And I think the associate is fully entitled to do that in this day and age, and not have to wait until the formal appraisal.
Thank you. Yeah. And sticking to the question of performance reviews and performance appraisals, Chloé, if I may ask you, how would you approach, or how would you recommend a junior lawyer approaches a performance appraisal or review to ensure that they're happy with things like salaries and bonuses, and not to hide away from those topics?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here, even if only on the screen. I hope you hear me, and if you don't, please scream. Yeah, so salaries, it's a difficult topic, and I mean, many large law firms have standard salary policies. So, you know, which are based on the number of years you've been practicing as a lawyer. And for bonus, usually there are calculations made on the basis of your billables. So if there is such an uniform policy at your firm, it makes negotiations about salary quite difficult, because the same rules apply for everyone, and they are based on objective criteria. So I would try first to check what the rules are at your firm, what is the policy, if there is one, and if there is some transparency about that. And if there is no standard remuneration policy, and really you think that your salary does not reflect your market value, then I think by all means you should try to negotiate. And I think, as you said, that performance reviews can be a good opportunity for doing so. This is a challenging discussion, and I mean, we are all disputes lawyers. We are used at negotiating, but sometimes we are not as good advocates for ourselves as we are for our clients. And also these are things things that you are negotiating with senior partners at your firms, and so also with lawyers that are very used to negotiating and who are very good at that. So not easy. And so I would really say to be prepared, do your research, know what your market value is, also prepare a list of your accomplishments, why you really think that you deserve to make more money, and what did you achieve in the firm that will justify that. Yeah, and also read your audience, I mean, if you're in a performance review and you just had a bad feedback, maybe that's not the best time to raise salary unhappiness. So maybe it's time to delay. And so I would, in a performance review, I would let the partners speak and give you their feedback, and then maybe on that basis decide whether it is time to raise salary concerns.
Yeah, very insightful. Thank you. Turning gears a little bit. Ite, I wanted to ask you for some practical examples here for everyone in the room and watching online. In relation to directing your own career, how do you feel you get work, or where have been circumstances where you've gotten work that you want to do, and how you approach those situations?
Thanks for the question. I think that the short answer is simply to just ask. It's quite a difficult thing to do, I think, but the answer is quite simple. So I can speak a bit from personal experience. I think around 4 or 5 years ago, I started practicing in this firm in a different department. And in the department, I was specializing in a certain area of practice. And I think it didn't take long for me to realize that I didn't really have an affinity an area of practice. The documents are very voluminous. The content was very dry and quite repetitive. So I think after a while, what I really wanted was practice that was more broad-based, and more wide-ranging. So I think one fine day, I just plucked up my courage and I emailed my partner to say that can I have a quick chat with you? But I think so I had a chat, and I think but my partner's response was, I think, more helpful than I expected. So she not only empathized with me and listened to my concerns, she also took the extra step to liaise with other partners from the firm, and so to recommend to other parts of the shift. And she even spoke to the partners that we start future folks, putting my word on me and things like that. So eventually, the outcome was that I didn't even have to interview, and my current department. It's all really nice to get up for me. So I think that's like, I think the lesson we learned is to believe that then it just ask, and you'll be surprised by your partner's response. And I think it's a little surprised by how they actually invested in the cross satisfaction, the point that you actually paid it might be. And really, I think for them, it's not in their interest. I think it is and each member that is very instructive work that is so just to get a speak out.
Thank you. That's just when in doubt, ask. And moving on, but staying on this topic, thank you for that. How does one set boundaries, and how does one have that conversation? So Chloé, if I can come back to you on this, do you have any practical examples on when you've had to set boundaries for yourself as an associate and a managing associate, and have there been circumstances where your boundaries may differ to that of your colleagues, and how have you dealt with situations like that?
Yes, thank you. And I think we have also a question from someone attending online about this question. This is a very important topic, and being an arbitration lawyer is a very demanding job. It requires a huge amount of commitment, and in my view, really to ensure that you will still love doing that job on the long run, you really need to also protect some kind of work-life balance. And for me, in my experience, it was really I mean, I was a yes person for a very long time. And then I had kids. And I had to learn how to say no, because I have family commitments that I cannot move. And I have to pick up my kids from daycare. And so I have to learn how to set some boundaries. And how you do that? Well, that's the difficult, the tricky question. And I think the first thing is probably to know what your boundaries are, you know, to know for yourself what you're willing to compromise on, because this is, as I said, this is a demanding job, and the clients are also demanding. They are paying high fees for what we do, and they deserve commitment. So there are things you need to compromise on, and there are things you're not willing to compromise on. There are non-negotiables. For instance, and this is a question we got in the Q&A, but it's, for instance, your integrity, your physical and mental integrity is non-negotiable. So it's not okay to be yelled at, it's not okay to be insulted, of course, but there are things you will, you may accept, accept compromising on. So once you know what your boundaries are, actually, it's really communication, remain professional, remain flexible, tell the people, no, I can't have this call tonight because I have a commitment, but I will be available later. You can call me after 8, or I don't know, or you can call me tomorrow early. So remain flexible, but yeah, push back on what is non-negotiable for you.
Thank you. Staying on this topic, actually, because there is something quite topical right now, which work from home arrangements, agile working, flexible working hours, many different phrases for this. But Jose, I wanted to put this to you. How would a junior lawyer set some boundaries on things like flexible working hours, work from home policies, when a lot of firms are actually now bringing people back to the office? How would you go about advising a junior lawyer when they're approaching this kind of a conversation?
Oh, I'm sorry. Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? Good morning from New York. Can you all hear me? I'm sorry. I've been struggling with my sound, which is very fitting for the panel on difficult conversations, by the way. Look, I think first of all, thank you for the invitation, and it's great to have you to be with you all here. It's really, I don't think this is a firm issue. I don't think this is a firm by firm issue. I think this is a partner by partner issue. So it really depends on who you work with. I always found that the people that I admire the most and the people that I work the hardest for are those that I could communicate with openly and with respect. And I think that where you work from is something that evolves from your communication with the people you work with. And as long as you are committed to doing your absolute best, it should not be as relevant where you're working. That said, you know, we should all be mindful that when we travel or when we work remotely, we probably are not as efficient as we are in our office. Maybe working remotely leads to the same efficiency, but maybe traveling does not lead to the same efficiency, you know, because we're human, we get tired, we have jet lag and so on. So I think if you really want to have some kind of flexible work arrangement, you need to make sure that that works for the person that you work with primarily, because at the end of the day, as a junior lawyer, the partner that you work with is your client, right? The partners that you work with, they should be seen as your clients. And B, make sure that if they give you a chance to do it, you actually respond by doing your absolute best. You're actually going to be a better worker when you're not in the office than when you are in the office. And if you can actually meet those two conditions, then the way to do it is just simply, you know, keep on it. Just once you have that open conversation and they give you a chance and you deliver, you're never going to have that conversation again, because it would become the norm for your work. That's how I would approach it. And a big tip for our junior practitioners would be this: probably too early in your career, people are not going to know enough about you and your skills and your commitment to your career to make a judgment as to whether you really want to go and work hard from abroad or remotely, or you just want to be slightly less busy or a bit lazy. And look, it's absolutely valid to want to work remotely or to want to work while traveling. That's absolutely a valid choice. But what I'm trying to say is that when you're a junior person starting at a law firm, you're still a known quantity to many people. Maybe it's a good idea to prove yourself first and then start asking for that kind of latitude.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very helpful and very insightful. Is there anything further on this topic from the panelists before I move on to our next topic? No? Okay. So this next topic is something that I personally struggle with myself, and it's relevant to most junior practitioners. It's giving and receiving feedback. And let me start with Yitie here as an associate and now a senior associate. How have you approached receiving feedback, and particularly what approach have you taken when the feedback isn't necessarily positive or is not something that you necessarily agree with?
Yeah, so I think it's quite common to receive feedback and to sort of disagree with that. So I guess, because this can arise from quite a number of factual scenarios, I think maybe I'll just give a few general tips as to how to approach this topic. So I guess one point would be that try to consider the feedback in an objective and see an open mind. Even to disagree with it, there might be some degree to which you can still learn from the feedback, even if you disagree. And even if the feedback is wrong, what remains true is that the person holds the it is still learn from that. You know, and I think the second point is that don't ever take feedback personally. You know, I think more often than not, your seniors and your partners, they are really only focused on work, and you don't really have any intention to damage you personally. So don't take it personally. And I think perhaps again is if you do come back, I think you engage in a dialogue with the senior or the partner who give you feedback. Especially when they make certain very broad, sweeping statements that you can't understand. And maybe that they try to pull out the stop to the back of so you can clarify with them. These are the general tips.
I think this actually goes into the next question I was going to pose to you, but what happens when you disagree with a senior team member's approach to a piece of work? But I think you've answered that. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I guess in the feedback, if what I disagree with is not so much the person's assessment, but the strategies or taking the file. I think the point is that, say for a very exceptional scenario when issues of ethics or professional negligence is concerned, I think the general approach is to always respectfully flag out your point, your disagreement, and the reasons substantiating that disagreement to that senior. And I think generally they really value it because most of the seniors and partners are very busy, but they have a lot of blind spots. And you are probably the one who is most familiar on the file with all the documents and all the research. So I think your seniors would pretty much have their mistake pointed out by you than having it pointed out by the court or being embarrassed in front of clients. So just flag it and don't be hurt by the fear of them not eventually adopting your suggestion, because even if you disagree with you, at least having to explain to you and sort of an explanation as to why your position wasn't adopted and so that's how it is.
Thank you. And before we move on to the converse of the sort of giving feedback, is there anything from the panelists about receiving feedback and advice that you give to junior lawyers? Michael, maybe I can start with you.
I was just going to say that it's a two-way street, and a lot depends on the partner that you're working with, and it's up to the partner to establish a relationship which is cordial enough to get feedback and to be able to give it back to the associate in a way that is not going to put the associate off whatever they're doing for life. It's very much a two-way street.
Thank you. Anything from our virtual panelists on receiving feedback?
Yeah, I think that was said just before. It's don't take it too personally, because the good feedbacks, they are always nice to have, of course, but these are really the bad feedbacks that bring you further in your career and in your personal development. So just take that as an opportunity to improve and yeah, and move on.
Great, thank you. And okay, now going to giving feedback, and this is quite novel for for a lot of junior lawyers. They're used to receiving feedback, but giving feedback may be a new experience. So, Jose, could you walk us through your perspective on how a junior lawyer should approach giving feedback, and particularly where feedback may not be positive?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think that's a very important question, because feedback and communication is truly essential to a functional team, and therefore to good work product for our clients. The first thing I would encourage anyone that is giving feedback to do is to start with something positive. Because the moment you actually tell an associate your work is a piece of junk, and that's the first sentence when they walk into your office, that person is immediately going to be thrown off or going to the defensive. Start with something positive. Start with, I'm glad you met the deadline, or thank you for covering all the sections that I asked you to cover, or, you know, anything. Thank you for using the right font, you know, anything along those lines. Frankly, if you can say anything positive, start with that. Not because we don't want to put substance first. We should put substance first, but because we want to make sure that the person that is receiving feedback is going to be receptive, right? It's not just about getting the point across. And this is from a guy that practices in New York, you know, where people don't take 2 seconds to say good morning. But first thing you do is make sure that the other person is going to be in a position to accept feedback in a constructive way. So, and by the way, I must confess, that's not something I do all the time, because we're busy. We're running places, we're answering emails, we're going after clients, we're responding to preliminary injunction requests and so on. So you don't always have the time to sit down and say, well, good morning, it's a pleasure to see you. Let me tell you about the brief. Thank you for sending it. But now let me, right? So, but there's gotta be 10 seconds in your life where you can actually take the time to make the other person feel slightly more welcome than just starting with something very bad. So once you've given them the initial, you know, salutation or something positive, however small it is that you can say something positive, then be absolutely honest. The one thing I would encourage our junior associates to do when they give feedback to someone else is exactly what I do with them. Be absolutely honest with your feedback. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't say, well, maybe perhaps you should reconsider how you draft. Just say, look, it's not properly drafted. Just say, look, that section, that argument is not persuasive. Or just say, you overlooked the critical case law. Just say it. Just be absolutely honest. Respectful, but honest. That's why you started with something cordial and kind. And now you're going to be honest, but respectful and to the point. And perhaps the most important thing you do when you give feedback is actually tell them specifically how they can improve it. Because it's pointless to tell a junior associate, it's pointless for an associate to tell someone junior to them that, well, this is actually not good, this doesn't work. You know, maybe you don't have the time to figure out why it doesn't work, how we fix it, but if you have the time, actually figure out why it doesn't work and how we fix it, and then communicate that to the person that is receiving feedback. Because the person that is receiving feedback most times would want to learn from you, right? And they only learn if you actually tell them. Few people just learn by watching and repeating. It's easier to actually learn and teach if we actually tell people why it is that what they're doing does not necessarily work and how they can slightly tweak it. So to me, that's a big part of giving feedback. Give them something specific that they can improve upon, not just go home and think that they're not good enough.
Thank you very much. I think that's very helpful as well, and to look at both sides of the spectrum on how you receive and give feedback, because it is a part of every junior lawyer's career progression. So, keeping the time in mind, I want to move on to our last topic here, and I want to open up the floor here to both Michael and Jose. And this is difficult conversations with clients. It's something that is novel to a lot of junior lawyers. Usually they have difficult conversations with colleagues, partners, clients, maybe not so much. So can I ask you at the outset, how should a junior lawyer approach or initiate conversations with clients with a view to assisting the partner, the team, or marketing the firm to a prospective client? Michael or Jose, I leave it to you to decide who wants to take it first.
I can't see.
Michael, maybe.
Oh, please go ahead, Michael. Michael, yeah, I was waiting for you to go ahead and start. Yeah.
I think one way, and probably the safer way for certainly a junior associate, is to tell the partner you work for and get the partner to have a conversation with the client, because that's what the partner's there for, quite frankly. I remember a case where when I was a partner, where an associate who was on an overseas assignment with a client, to put it frankly, he made a pass to her, which was unacceptable. And she reported it to the partner when she got back, and the partner said, well, he is one of our best clients, which he was, which is why he probably thought he could get away with it. But she persisted, and a conversation was had with the by the partner. And I think that's the way, and I think in this day and age, that sort of incident deserves protection from the partner you're with.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Jose, do you have anything further to add on this?
Yes. Well, first of all, as to what Michael said, absolutely. I mean, nowadays it's hard to imagine a respectable firm actually turning a blind eye towards a situation like that. And that's not okay. It was never okay, but thankfully now it's absolutely, or it's almost universally agreed that it's not okay. Now, in terms of communications directly between the junior associate and the client, that's a very delicate, very, very delicate issue, and it could be a minefield for junior associates, because ultimately, let's all be realistic here. Clients are the livelihood of the law firm, right? The partners need clients. We need clients so that we can actually survive at law firms and the law firms can thrive. So the last thing we want is for a junior associate in our team to jeopardize our relationship with our client. And they can do that very easily with the wrong form of communication. And maybe the junior associate really needs to be careful in what they say or don't say to a client. And I need to be in sync with the partner. Again, communication is key, right? You should, as a matter of fact, every team, every lawyer, every partner should absolutely be completely honest with the client about the assessment of the case and the merits of the case and the strategy of the case and so on. So that is for the partner to do, and there is no excuse for a partner to not do it. We need clients to be informed about what we're doing and about what it is that they want us to do with their business, because ultimately it's their choices. However, it is probably inappropriate for a junior associate to be addressing those subjects without a partner being there, because the partner may know what has been discussed before. The partner may actually have more context than the junior associate does. The partner may actually have more experience than the junior associate does, and therefore may have a different point of view. Think of it this way: a partner has actually arbitrated the same issue stemming from an MIA dispute 5 times, and he has seen that a claim can succeed. But the junior associate goes and reads a case that he thinks that is fatal to the position of the client, and he goes and tells the client. I mean, look, if you are the partner, you're of course not going to be very pleased by that, right? Because while we should inform the client that the case law is probably not the most favorable, we should also say that there are alternatives to that and that we've seen how other tribunals have addressed the same issue and have still ruled for clients in similar situations. But a junior associate would probably not necessarily have all that information and background and context. So a junior associate just running and to the client, and just blurting that conclusion out of context could probably jeopardize the relationship with the client. So long story short, communicate with the partner, make sure that you're in sync with what the client is being told. Of course, always make sure that the client is informed, because that's our ethical duty. We never bypass that. But but make sure that you don't speak out of turn, right? That's when seniority really comes into play, and that's when we should be deferential to the more senior people on the team.
Thank you very much. I think you've answered my next question. Something I'm not going to go there, but I've come up with another question. So we've spoken about how junior lawyers should, speak to partners first and get kind of consensus on the team before clients are approached. How then, and this is open to all the panelists, so how then would a junior lawyer feel that they are contributing to the business development of a client? Because it's very well to be working for a client and doing a lot of the work in the background, but how would you advise that they feel included in the development of that client and the relationship that the firm has with that client?
Well, I'm happy to take that,
Sure.
unless someone wants. It's going to depend on the size of the client. But let's assume that the client is a big multinational company that has operations in many countries, and the junior lawyer can probably take lead on making sure that we stay on top of new disputes by the client. Say that we're working with the head of upstream for a specific company that has global presence, and we learn that they may have a similar dispute to the one we're dealing for them in, say, Mexico, that the next one may be in Nigeria. So, but we have the approach, we have the relationship with the person in charge of those disputes at the company. If the junior lawyer that is working on the case actually stays on top of those developments and knows what's happening with the company, he can actually bring it up and help the team and the firm actually develop more business with the client. So the first thing is know your client. Actually know what they do, stay abreast of current developments. That's key. It's going to be easier to do for bigger clients, but when you have smaller clients, what you can do is you can figure out what else they need from the firm that we could offer. Sometimes junior associates will have the most communications with specific people at the client level, right? I mean, probably the partner will talk to the GC, but when it comes to talking to the infield person, probably the junior associate will end up talking a lot longer and for a lot longer time than the partner will. So use those conversations to actually learn about the needs of the company in sight and figure out if there is something else that we can legitimately offer to them, and then run it by the partner. So know your client, know your customer. That's always going to be first.
I think just to add to that, again, it comes back to the partner very much and the relationship between the partner and the associate, which is sufficient for them to feel comfortable about being included in the conversations. I remember there was a very distinguished QC in London who sadly died a few years ago, but called Bob Alexander, and he was the chairman of the bar, and he was a very, very senior person. But if you took clients to him for advice on a particular matter, he would always say at the end of it, "Well, Michael, have you anything to add to that?" And it made you feel so inclusive, unlike some of the rather, in those days, pompous QCs who would deliver a sermon on the particular point and then say, "Thank you, bye-bye."
Thank you very much. So those are the topics we had for discussion today. Before we close off, I want to invite the people not only with us here in Singapore, but also those joining us virtually. Any questions you have for the panelists, this is a great time. Get first-hand information that you want. So maybe I'll invite the people in the room first. If you have any questions, there's a microphone right on the right-hand side. Anyone? Maybe I'll ask the people virtually if it is. Yeah.
So we have a question online from one of our participants. She says, "I would be particularly interested in the personal level. In particular, how would you react in situations when a person you're working with is under a lot of pressure and unable to absorb the pressure and gets verbally abusive to you and other junior associates? For example, yelling, constant calls throughout the night?
Maybe I will address this to Chloé.
Yes, thank you. Actually, this question makes me very sad because this is just not okay. It's not okay to yell at people and to insult them, and especially not at your junior associates. So how do you react when that happens? This is difficult, and I think young lawyers in our profession are quite at risk because you worked so hard to get where you are, and so you're more likely to accept unacceptable behaviors. But I think it's again communication, and communicate that it's not okay, and that you're not able to provide good work in such a toxic environment.
Yeah, if I may, first of all, I agree with Chloé that it's actually a sad situation. And unfortunately, you know, junior people in this industry are actually at the mercy, I would say, of more senior people. And because you work very hard to get where you are, you work very hard to finally get that job. You want to learn, you want to work with specific law firm or specific partner. And then people turn out to be jerks, and then they yell at you and then disrespect you. And I would say that's absolutely never okay. Don't bow to that just because that person is a partner, or that person has a lot of reputation, or that firm is very big. Just put an end to it immediately, and make sure that you tell people from the very beginning in a very respectful way that you expect that relationship to be based on professional and mutual respect. And the key is communication, as Chloé said. Frankly, you know, if someone is yelling at you, you may very politely, or you should very politely say, I'm happy to address your comments, and I'm happy to improve on what you're asking me to improve, but I would ask that you don't yell at me because I'm not yelling at you, right? And you would learn that a lot of those abusive characters in big law have probably never been told that they're not doing things right. So what they need is for someone to tell them. And if you are the first person to tell them, or the first person to tell them in a long time, you know, they will probably appreciate that. They will probably respect you for being able to stand up to them. Don't lose objectivity. Make sure that you don't turn that into a personal fight, but politely say that's absolutely not acceptable. I'm happy to address the substance, but can you please address me in a more respectful way? And look, eventually, if people don't change, you may need to escalate things, as long as if it's personal, if it's disrespectful. That's my advice. My advice is open up, open your mouth, like literally speak up. Don't let them just run you over.
Thank you. Did you have anything to add to that from a senior associate perspective?
Not very much, actually. I completely agree that if you never shout on the face, and that happens with the very situational channels.
Thank you. Sveta, do we have any further questions? Last opportunity for anyone in the room to ask the panelists any questions. All right, with that then, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who's attended in person and also taken the time to attend virtually. And more importantly, the panelists for taking time out of their very busy schedules to speak with all of us about some very interesting topics on managing difficult conversations in this early stage in our careers. So thank you all very much for being here, and hope to see you all again soon for more of these types of events. Thank you, Sunita, as well.
Thanks. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening in Singapore.
Thank you.
Thank you.